Today we're going to be talking about the cult classic Fujifilm camera that every photographer is buying right now. This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. What is going on, everyone, man? Welcome back to yet another King Japes episode. Now, folks, as mentioned in the intro, we're going to be talking about the cult classic Fujifilm camera that everybody seems to be buying right now. I mean, it's a camera that is about 7 years old now. It's not the newest or fastest piece of gear available. It definitely doesn't have all of the brand new features, but it is a camera that I personally feel like doesn't need an upgrade. I've never wanted to upgrade this camera, mainly because of all the features it has. It's a pure photography stills camera. It has absolutely everything that I need in a photography camera, which is why I feel like a lot of people gravitate towards this particular camera body. And if you haven't guessed which camera this is already, folks, I'm holding it here in my hand right now. It is the ever so famous, iconic Fujifilm XPro 2. Now check this out, guys. You might be wondering, the XPro 2, man, that is a camera from 2016. I know. It's currently 2023, so it makes it a 7-year-old camera. Now, interestingly enough, in the recent years, the XPro 2 has had a huge push from the photography community. I think mainly because every feature that you would need in a stills camera is built into this camera right here. I'm gonna talk a little bit about that in today's episode, but also show sample photos because, yeah, you can always buy the newest and greatest camera, but I feel like the XPro 2 has a feature set that is unbeatable. And in my opinion, nothing beats the XPro 2 when it comes to value for money and performance. So without further ado, guys, let's talk about a couple of reasons why the XPro 2 is a really iconic camera when it comes to the photography community and why it is so popular today. All right, you guys, so check this out. This is the XPro 2 up close and personal. It is a gorgeous camera. I think one of the main reasons why a lot of people like the XPro 2 still is because of the shape. It is a rangefinder styled camera, so it doesn't have an actual rangefinder system built in. This camera does utilize autofocus and manual focus, but it does have that see-through optical viewfinder, which you can use as an optical viewfinder or switch it over into an electric viewfinder. So in terms of mirrorless cameras, this has an APS-C sensor. It's not full frame, but it does have 24 megapixels, which is plenty for anything like posting on social media, even printing pretty large. I've printed 20 by 30, and honestly, it turned out really, really good. So it's definitely not lacking with the image quality. But even though this camera is very aesthetically pleasing, I mean, check that out, look at the rear LCD screen. It's also a very solid performer. So one of the really, really cool things about the XPro 2 is that it has a dual card slot. And the dual card slot is huge for working professionals. So a lot of times I'll often hear people shooting with like a Fuji XH2 or something like that, and then their backup body is an XPro 2. And while the XPro 2 does hold value at around like maybe $700-800 used on eBay, you can definitely find them for some pretty good deals, anywhere between like $400 to $700, depending on where you look. So that is the route to go. If you are looking to get an XPro 2, definitely buy it used. Now, apart from the dual card slots, you have a ton of different customizable buttons and dials. So on the top, you actually have a manual shutter speed dial, which you can pretty much select through. You have your exposure compensation right here, ready to go. You got a front wheel dial, which is really great for dialing in things like exposure. And overall, there's a sense of tacticality. Is that a word? And overall, it feels like a very tactical camera. And I think that's a lot of the reason why people go for something like this over something like the Fuji X-T2, which feels more like a traditional mirrorless camera. So overall, in terms of functionality and aesthetic, I think this camera has one of the best layouts. I mean, it is an amazing looking camera. That rangefinder style really allows you to feel like you are shooting something like a Leica. And something that I think a lot of people really won't admit to is that the Fujifilm XPro 2 is kind of like a Leica alternative if you don't want to break the bank. You kind of get that look down, not exactly 100%, and you don't get the rangefinder system, but you get a camera that is great for stills. Honestly, no one uses it for video, but the styling is really what sets it apart, as well as how consistent it is when it comes to putting out really high quality images. And that is partly due to Fujifilm's in-camera simulations. So Fujifilm offers a ton of different simulations. And one really cool thing about the simulations is they allow you to pretty much dial them in however you want it. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that here in my in-camera settings in this next part. But really quick, I wanna give a huge thank you and shout out to our sponsor for this episode, the good folks over at Squarespace. Squarespace is your all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Now, as a photographer in 2023, one of the best ways to stand out from the crowd is to have your own professional website. Luckily, Squarespace offers a ton of different website templates you can use to get up and running within minutes. On my website created through Squarespace, I have an e-commerce shop which I'm able to sell prints from, as well as different camera gear. I also have a dedicated page for a portfolio, as well as my gallery for street photography. But one of my newest favorite features that I'm implementing here soon is the video page, where it allows me to share my content for video directly on my website, either through direct upload or a link from my YouTube channel. So if you are a content creator and you want to push out some video content onto your website, Squarespace has you covered. So to get started today with Squarespace, head over to squarespace.com/KingJapes and enter promo code KingJapes at checkout, and you guys can get 10% off of your first purchase of a domain or a website. Huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's episode. All right, you guys, let's get into the nit and grit about all of the different Fujifilm simulations. So when you hit the Q button here, you access what we call like a quick menu system. And here you can pretty much save film simulation presets and have them built into your camera for use at any time. So I don't know if you guys can see that here, but I have a Kodachrome recipe on there. I know there's Portrait in here, Portrait 160 VC, I got HP5. I mean, there is a ton of different effects and simulations that you can put together to create something really magical. There's a certain quality to the XPro 2 sensor. Maybe it's the X-Trans 2 that comes in here. With the right settings, you could really make these images look like film, which is a huge appeal for a lot of people. So you have all of the really classic film simulations like Pro Negative Standard, you have Pro Negative High, Classic Chrome, which is probably the one that I use the most. And all of these simulations will give you different looks, different feels. Some are great for landscapes, some are great for portraits. And if you really want to dig deeper into the rabbit hole of Fujifilm simulations, I'm going to link the Kodachrome recipe that I have, which is pretty much my go-to film recipe when it comes to my XPro 2. The images that come out of that is insane, and I honestly recommend, if you have a Fuji XPro 2, try my recipe out. It's just really amazing. Now let's talk a little bit about the autofocus. So the autofocus really depends mostly on the lenses when it comes to the Fujifilm camera. So with the XPro 2, of course, the body is going to have some role, especially because you select autofocus points and has different tracking features. But what I could say about the XPro 2 is it's not incredibly fast, but it is fast enough. I mean, I've shot things like weddings with the XPro 2. I've done tons and tons of street photography. And the way I like to set my camera up is to have a single autofocus point in the center of the screen. And you can kind of use this dial here on the back to control where you want that focus point to be. I don't notice a huge difference when it comes to autofocusing in the XPro 2 versus like my Sony a7 III. And I hope that goes to show just kind of how great the autofocus system is in here, because with the right lenses, I feel like this camera is insanely quick. Now, on the topic of lenses, the XPro 2 has a wide array of different lenses that Fujifilm offers, as well as, you know, some third-party options. Some of my personal favorites are this one right here. This is the 23mm f2. This has a custom hood on it though. If you guys want that hood, I'm gonna leave it in the description below. But the 23mm f2, this is the WR version. You know, it's pretty inexpensive. I think this is a cheaper lens when it comes to the Fujifilm system. You get a 35mm equivalent, and as an everyday kind of thing, I think this is a perfect lens. It's super sharp, autofocus is quick, and you guys, you just cannot go wrong with a lens like this. And all Fujifilm lenses have that aperture on the top, so it just adds to that tactical feeling that you get when you are shooting a film camera. You can pretty much select your aperture directly onto your lens. And let's say you're somebody that doesn't want to have that tactical feel, you can always set these cameras to A, which allow you to control your aperture and shutter speed using the dials on the camera. My second favorite lens, you guys, is this one right here. This is the Fujifilm 18mm f2. Now 18mm with the APS-C crop ends up being around a 28mm, and this is a fantastic lens. It's an older lens. I think it came out with the XPro 1, but check it out. It comes with a square hood from the factory. Now a lot of people say the autofocus on this lens is bad, but I've personally never had any issues. I shoot this lens between like f4 and f8 most of the time because that's where it is the most sharp, and I've never had a problem with autofocus. It's actually pretty dang quick. I think the main difference with this lens though versus like the 23mm f2 is that it does have focus by wire, so you are going to see that front element kind of go up and down when it is focusing, just like you would see on like a classic SLR lens. But nonetheless, it is an amazing lens, and I typically pair the 18mm f2 with my 23mm f2, and I am set for any type of photography. Other great lenses are like the 56mm 1.2, that is an 85mm equivalent. And then you also have lenses from like third-party companies like 7 Artisans or TT Artisans. There's a ton out there and a lot of aftermarket compatibility. And the last thing that I kind of want to talk about with the XPro 2 is The fact that as time goes on, the price is also going to reflect that, hopefully kind of getting lower and lower. For the piece of gear that you're getting, for 800 bucks, you're getting dual card slots, a camera that has fast autofocus, amazing image quality at 24 megapixels, film simulations for days with different recipes that you can customize to your liking, tactical feel and control, this beautiful, elegant looking camera body, high quality LCD screen that allows you to view your images. You're getting a bang. You're getting such a bang for your buck for 800 bucks. And like I mentioned in the beginning, there was never one point where I felt like I needed to upgrade the X Pro 2. I think it's one of those cameras where it's sort of timeless, like it doesn't need an upgrade. It has everything you need in a camera. And honestly, if this was like the only camera that I could have forever pretty much, I think I would be perfectly happy, because anything you throw its way, it's going to handle it, and it's going to handle it really well. But with that said, there are a ton of aftermarket, I guess you could say, accessories that work on the X Pro 2 that make it really, really fun to use. So for example, I have an aftermarket lens hood on my 23mm f2. It has a nice square look to it to kind of add to that rangefinder aesthetic. I can put shutter buttons on here. This one is a wooden one that I got from a company called The More Gooder. In terms of straps and whatnot, man, check that out. This is a leather strap from Clever Supply Co. using the Peak Design anchor. And you know, something about Japanese craftsmanship when it comes to these cameras is insane. It's a camera that will go down in the history of time as one of the best cameras ever created, and I'm confident that the X Pro 2 will continue to have a cult following, maybe 5, even 10 years in the future. I even outfitted this camera to have a little thumb rest, which acts as kind of like an advanced lever on a film camera. But you know what? That's going to wrap it up for me with the Fujifilm X Pro 2. I feel like I make a video about this camera every single year because it is just that good. I need to remind you guys that the newest and greatest isn't always the best. A lot of times it's what you find that is stable and consistent that's going to give you really good results over the years. You know, this is a tool. It's not flashy. Maybe it's a little flashy, but it is one workhorse of a camera that I personally would highly recommend. So check it out, Fujifilm X Pro 2. But that's gonna wrap it up, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know in the comment section down below if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns on the Fujifilm X Pro 2. Share what your thoughts are, if you would buy one, or if you think there is a better camera out there. If you're new to the channel, drop a like down below and also hit that subscribe button. But that's gonna wrap it up for me, man. I'll see you guys in the next episode. As always, minnow to get.